Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? We're here in Sarita, Arizona with the Tea Party, Sarita Tea Party weekly update. It's good to see you all. My name is Don Woolley. And tonight we're going to have State Senator Michelle Ugenti Rita on with us to talk about election fraud. And so while we're waiting for her to join us on Zoom, I'm going to switch to the other camera shot, and we'll see if we can't get going here. So good to see you all, and I hope that you're enjoying your day. And it looks like Governor Ducey has given us some a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. He's opening up salons and barbershops, I guess, on this Friday. And next Monday, he's going to let us go to actually go sit down in restaurants. So I think that's good, although I don't think it's happening fast enough. I'd like to see the whole state open up and lift the executive order. So I know that some people in the state legislature are working on that, trying to get the votes to override his executive order. So we'll see if that happens. But like I said, at least there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. So we're just waiting for Michelle to join us, and we'll be back in a moment. I'll put you on hold for a little bit and wait for her to join us. So again, stay safe. Hope you're all doing well, and just be a few minutes. So hi everybody, we're back and we're waiting for Michelle Ugenti Rita to join us. Michelle is a senator in LD23, and she is involved with working to ensure election integrity in Arizona. She has processed some bills in the legislature. In 2016, she passed a bill outlawing by statute ballot harvesting, and she'll talk about that. And that bill was challenged by the Dems, and it's actually gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. So she'll let you know about that. She's also had a run-in with the Arizona Secretary of State about the election manual, which she was a good catch for her. And I think she's joining us right now on Zoom. So stand by here a minute. We'll switch over. So there's Michelle on Zoom. She joins us now, and Michelle, you'll have to unmute yourself if you could.
How about now? Hey.
Wow, yeah, that's good, Michelle. Can you hear me okay?
I'm doing well, thank you. I can hear you perfectly.
So, Michelle, you've been intimately involved with ballot harvesting, and you passed a bill. Yes. I can't remember if it was 2018, 2016, but I know that it was your bill, and you got it through the Senate and the House, and the governor signed it. And now the Dems are opposing you, opposing the law, the statute of ballot harvesting. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and the bill and where it's at now, and what's going on as far as the court.
It was 2016.
And so take it away.
Sure. So in Arizona, we allow for vote by mail. That doesn't exist in every state. And it has been something that we offer for many years. So for at least the past 20 years, you've been able to vote by mail. You have to opt into this service. But once you do, that a ballot will be sent to you in the mail. That's fine. But ballot harvesting addresses how that ballot gets returned. So when you vote for mail, you're supposed to return that ballot yourself by putting it back into the mailbox. It will come in an envelope. You'll fill out your ballot, you put it in the envelope, seal the envelope, and then put it back in to the mailbox, and you'll get a prepaid envelope. There's been a movement for several years to have party activists or just anyone pick up your ballot and return it for you. And that's what's called ballot harvesting. I did a bill in 2016 that said, now we're going to prohibit ballot harvesting. And you want to know why? Because there's not enough benefit to that practice. And there's a lot of exposure to things going wrong and potential manipulation. The bill passed in the House and in the Senate and was signed by the governor. So that means the act of picking up someone's ballot, so having a third party pick up someone else's ballot and return it for them, is prohibited in the state of Arizona. Hillary Clinton, along with Bernie Sanders and the DNC, sued, and we won in district court. So the state won and the law was upheld. They appealed to the Ninth Circuit. We won again at the Ninth Circuit. But in the Ninth Circuit, there's a small panel of judges that first look at an appeal. And we won that. It's a 3-judge panel. They appealed to a larger panel. believe, 11 judges. We lost that. So the decision was overturned. Our Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, has now, as of last week, appealed the overturned decision by the en banc. It's called decision from the Ninth Circuit, which is that larger panel, has appealed that decision to the United States Supreme Court, and that's where we're at. So there's been a formal request that the United States Supreme Court hear the Ninth Circuit's court decision. They, of course, have time to review that and will make a decision on whether they'll hear the case or not. I hope they hear the case. Those are fingers crossed. But we'll see. I think maybe we can expect something around the end of June, in which case they'll weigh in and they'll assess whether prohibiting ballot harvesting is what the opponents say is unconstitutional, which I believe that it is not. Or if they'll agree with us that, of course, it's not unconstitutional and each state has the right to make those election laws.
So let me ask you this, Michelle, is the law in effect
So the statute,
at this time for
we
the
were
next
granted a
election?
stay, so the statute is in effect. So we're in the 2020 election cycle, and you are prohibited from collecting someone else's ballot. If you are caught, there is a criminal penalty, and you can be charged with a Class 6 felony.
So that's my next question, Michelle, was what is the punishment for ballot harvesting? So we kudos for getting that passed, and well done. I want to tell you a little bit about Pima County, the last election, which was 2018. The election integrity committee down here in Pima County with Bill Beard as one of the people on that committee, and they found there probably was ballot harvesting in Pima County in the last election. And we're dealing with a county recorder who her philosophy, of course, was you put it on her doorstep, and she's going to she says they're going to count every vote. So they kind of encouraged it, and we know that there's some other things going on here, like some of the activity with emergency voting centers in Maricopa County, the past election. And we'd like to have your comments on that, if you could.
Yeah, 18. So emergency voting centers, or emergency voting, I should say, has existed for a long time. That's been an option for voters in all of our counties for quite some time. However, in 2018, the county recorder, at least in Maricopa County, decided to put up vote centers, emergency vote centers. Prior to that, if you wanted to vote by emergency, you would contact the county recorder's office, explain what your emergency was. You would talk about it, and if it rose to a certain level where the recorder thought you were experiencing emergency, you'd be allowed to go ahead and vote by emergency. Here, though, in 2018, they manipulated that law. And they undermined the spirit. The county recorder, Adrian Fontes, undermined the spirit of voting by emergency and decided to have and implement emergency vote centers that popped up throughout our district, at least in Maricopa County, arbitrarily, right? Which means there was no kind of like rhyme or reason to it. There was no public input. We didn't have a committee meeting with the Board of Supervisors to decide where these vote centers should be. Conveniently, or not so suspiciously, they ended up in particular pockets throughout the district. And it was a emergency vote center where anyone could go in and vote by emergency. That sounds fine, but it's not. Because if you are voting by emergency, that's very specific. It means you need to identify and articulate a said emergency. They're not just supposed to be a catch-all for individuals who didn't utilize other options to vote. But at these vote centers, they were not checking to see if anybody was experiencing an emergency, allowing people just to vote and putting up centers, you know, wherever they please throughout the district. And that went against the spirit of the law. And so I introduced a bill, and it was passed by the House and Senate and signed by the governor, that said, wait a minute, County Recorder, you abused that authority. You took it out of context and manipulated it. And so, you know what we're going to do? We're going to move that to the Board of Supervisors, to the County Board of Supervisors. So all of our counties have now the ability, the new authority, to decide the time, place, and manner of an emergency center. And they're going to have to call a public meeting, and they'll have to notice it, in which they can invite relevant stakeholders and the public to engage. And then they can decide if they want to have emergency voting centers, and if they do, where, how, the hours, you know, and all of the other particulars that go along with it. So that's what happened, because Mr. Fontes decided to manipulate and abuse his authority to utilize voting by emergency.
Yeah, it would be nice to let the supervisors have some input into the process, wouldn't it?
Well, not only do they have, it's not just input, they are the ones that control it. So they're the ones that are going to say, even if a county should utilize voting by emergency, maybe that's something that's not even offered. But if it is offered, it's going to be at the behest, or, where'd you go? I don't know. I cannot. I don't know why, but I can see myself. Hold on. Okay, well, we'll just go with that. They'll be able to decide first if they should use a emergency voting centers, and then this is the Board of Supervisors. And then if they do decide that, to what extent, the parameters around using an emergency voting center. So again, location, time, manner, and that will all now be decided by the Board of Supervisors. But again, in the bill, it says that they have to convene a hearing. And the reason I put that in the bill is because I want to incorporate public input. I want to make sure this is a item that's agendized and that goes out to the public, so they have an opportunity to weigh in, and then the public can decide.
Thank you, Michelle. I don't mean to go back and talk about something we already talked about, but I understand the Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, did not want to advance the ballot harvesting case, didn't want to appeal the decision of the Ninth Circuit, full court. And so our Attorney General, Mark Bronovic, he went ahead and took up the charge. Is that true?
Yeah, no, she did not. She did not want to advance that case. Yeah, you know, of course, this is partisan, right? So like I said previously, it was the DNC, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders that sued. And don't you think that's fascinating? It's just a little baby Arizona law, but you've got these national organizations and campaigns suing, because this is going to set a precedent. This is a very, very big deal. Arizona led the way, and if we're successful, it will be used as a kind of model legislation for other states moving forward. They don't want that. Their message, the message that they're selling the American people, is not resonating. It's not selling. Nobody's buying it. It's not working. And so I believe that they are left with manipulating our election system to get the desired results. So this is a critical bill in that battle. And while it only originated from one state, Arizona, it will impact how other states move forward regarding this issue.
Yeah, Michelle, ballot harvesting swung the election for the Democrats in Orange County in California, just on ballot harvesting. Yeah, and you know what? I'm not just talking about this from a partisan perspective.
I'm really not. I'm talking about this from what's best for voters. I know I am a registered Republican and a Republican senator, but I don't pass bills, nor would I ever pass a bill that just benefits one party to the detriment of another. That's irresponsible, and I wouldn't do that. The issue I have with ballot harvesting is it's ripe for fraud and manipulation, and there's not enough, again, benefit from allowing it to exist. And the reason I say that is, if you think about it, in Arizona, you have to opt into this system, which means you have to want to vote by mail. Otherwise, you're not going to receive your ballot by mail. So if you're opting into this system, you're saying it's convenient. It provides you convenience to receive your ballot by mail. And that would presumably extend to then returning it by mail. So I don't know why, it's convenient to receive it by mail, but then somehow it's a burden to return it by mail and you need a third party to help you do that. That's suspicious to me, and I don't think advances the cause of election integrity. And I don't care what party you come from. Our most recent example of this being manipulated was in North Carolina, and that was a Republican. That was a Republican in that race that was caught manipulating mail-in ballots. And that's wrong, because it's wrong for Republicans to do and it's wrong for Democrats to do.
So, Michelle, we also had the incident, the Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs was going to rewrite the election manual, and understanding that someone took exception to that, and she talked about curing ballots in that document, et cetera, and actually trying to rewrite the law. Would you comment on that, please?
Right. So in Arizona, so not maybe it doesn't just apply to Arizona, but at least in Arizona, we are governed by a variety of different political subdivisions, but we are governed by state statute, municipal ordinances, county ordinances or law, and then also, in addition to that, the election manual here in Arizona. The election manual is supposed to provide guidance and direction for how to implement statute. So we have, correct. So you've got statute, which dictates or spells out what laws govern elections. And then we have the election manual as a companion to that, to help our election administrators understand how to implement the policy and statute. And that's fine, okay? Oftentimes, we pass bills, and then in many instances, you'll need rules. In this case, that's what this is. The election manuals are rules to then further describe how you would implement and the procedures to go about implementing the statute. But what has happened with our election manual is it has been used as kind of a de facto extension of statute. And Katie Hobbs decided to include provisions in the manual that are outside the scope of the manual. In other words, it had nothing to do with giving direction, and had everything to do with adding new laws. If you want to add a new election law, then you need to find a sponsor in the House or the Senate and get that sponsor to draft a bill and then introduce the bill. And then that bill can go through the process, be vetted, it's up for discussion, and then voted on. What she did was include in the election manual a provision that said, which is not in statute, a provision that said ballots that do not have signatures accompanied with them. So remember, when you vote by mail, you have to sign the envelope. If you don't sign that envelope, so it's missing a signature, that ballot should be cured. So that means after the election is over, which is 7 p.m. on election day, individuals or ballots that have been returned without a signature would be extended a time period after the close of election to be cured, which means election officials would utilize that time to reach out to whoever was sent that ballot to see if indeed they signed it and if they wanted a chance to sign it. And that sounds fine because you're thinking, okay, well, maybe someone forgot to sign their ballot, and shouldn't we go ahead and try to make them whole or let them know? And you should let them know when we have that open voting window. But once you close the voting window, statute does not give you authority to cure those ballots. And it says clearly on the ballot, if this is not signed, this ballot is not counted. But instead of having that language dropped in a bill and presented to the legislature for discussion, she included it in the manual. And I have a big problem with making law outside of the legislative branch, because that really just undermines the public. Right now, the way it works is if you don't sign your ballot, it doesn't get counted. She wanted to change that. And whether I agree with it or not, it at least should have gone up for discussion at the legislature, because that is the appropriate branch. But she, again, didn't do that. She wanted to include it in the manual. And you have to understand that once that manual gets approved, it does come with the enforcement of law. So whatever it says in the manual, has the same effect of being written in statute. That's why it was a big deal that she included it there and didn't go through the legislative branch. Yes, well, so I brought a lot of attention to the issue and incorporated or asked for help from the Arizona Attorney General's office, which they were very helpful. I even was able to find support amongst Democrat county recorders that said, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't right. We don't count ballots that have not been signed. And if you want to have that discussion, you need to do it in the right arena. And so because of the Attorney General and other officials, elected officials, getting on board, it ultimately got removed. So that did get scrubbed from the manual and we were able to get it removed. But only because we're watching.
So Michelle, good for you. That was really a great catch. And, kudos to you for doing a great job on the election manual and Katie Hobbs. A reasonable person understands voting procedures and processes versus voting law. And, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be happy your vote is protected. I think everybody just wants to make sure their vote counts and that it's protected by law. And all these things are put in place to do that. So thank you again. Good job. And we
that's right.
we love
That's
your
right.
vigilance.
Election law should be nonpartisan. I don't want to win because the scales were tipped in Republicans' favor. That's not the way to win. I don't want to win that way. I want to win because my message is resonating, and so election integrity is important because we want to make sure we have confidence in the outcome, even if we don't like the outcome. Look, I'm a partisan gal. I want Republicans to win. But if they don't win, I want to be able to at least know the outcome is truly reflective of the voting population. And then we live to fight another day and we go back at it the next election season, and we do it all over again. That's fair. That's balanced. That's appropriate. That's the way our system is set up. What we don't want to do is put the heavy hand of special interest groups or people who have an agenda on the scale of our elections via manipulating election law. That's what we don't want to do. Nobody benefits from that.
So Michelle, have you heard the name of Dr. Sheila
No.
Brantley. And she is a former high-tech manager, semiconductors. She worked in the semiconductor industry. Very good with statistics. She ran for the city council of Austin, Texas. And you know that Austin, Texas is a liberal bastion, and she ran against basically a kid that they brought in to run against her. And she thought her campaign went really well. Her internal polling said she was going to win. And it turned out on election day that she did not win. And she was very suspicious of the final result. So she took it to court and did a statistical analysis of
Oh, wow.
everything she could, took the data, and she just believed that there was some election fraud, some voter fraud. So she took it all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, and after several appeals courts ruled against her, she got to the Texas Supreme Court, and finally they issued a judgment in her favor, and awarded her all costs, etc. And the only thing that the bad thing that resulted is that by the time it got to the Supreme Court and decided in Texas, the term of the office was almost over. So she was not she was not able to get on the city council at that time, but now she's taken the fight to the great state of Texas, and she's even involved now with a court case having to do with fighting a bond in the city of Houston, I believe it is. So her philosophy is that a candidate has standing, and that if there's a bad decision in an
Well,
election and the candidate is the only one that can challenge it in court, how do you
if
feel
I
about
thought
that?
it was necessary, I mean, I can't answer that because that's very situational and depends on what happened and what I thought went wrong.
So within a certain margin of error, the challenge would be automatic. But if your data told you that you actually won, would you challenge the result?
Well, kind of same answer. I mean, I don't know because it would just depend on the circumstances, what was going on, what I thought wasn't happening or was happening. I mean, it's hard to play what if scenarios.
So Michelle, there's currently a big push by the state Democrats and the national Democrats to go to an all mail-in election for the 2020 November election. And their reasoning is that it's a COVID-19 issue, an issue of safety. I guess they believe you can still go to the grocery store or essential places, but voting would be more dangerous and evidently non-essential, and therefore everybody would have to mail in their votes. Nobody could go vote at the ballot box on election day. So seen a lot about this in the news lately, and we'd like to get your opinion on that. Is an all mail-in election really necessary? It's an option now, which I think people like. They can go vote on election day, or they can mail in their ballot. And we feel it's unnecessary, and we think it's just an excuse. We don't think
Well, this is something
COVID-19
Democrats
is the
have tried to
reasoning
do
here,
for
is the
but
real reason.
yeah,
So
they
what
want
are your
to
thoughts on
do.
that?
It's actually just been something that's had a renewed level of interest in light of COVID-19. Here's my thoughts on it. It's unnecessary because we already allow for mail-in elections and mail-in voting. So it's moot. I don't get what they don't get about our laws here. You are allowed in Arizona to request a ballot by mail. You can do that singularly, so just for that election cycle, or you could get on our PIVA list, our permanent early voting list, and get your ballot mailed to you constantly. And that's your choice. So I don't see the need to go into session and pass a bill that says we are going to go into an all mail election and send everybody a ballot who has otherwise not requested one, because they have the option right now and the choice right now. We have plenty of time. You can request a early ballot up to, I think, up to 11 days prior to an election in Arizona. So it's unnecessary because we already do it.
Yeah, Michelle, just to let you know, Patty and I, we decided to stop and get off the PEVL list, the permanent early voting list, and we sent a letter to our county recorder down here in Pima County, and I asked her to remove us individual letters from the PEVL list, because we want to go vote on election day, because honestly, we're more confident in the way our ballots
and
are handled on election day.
Choice. That's the whole point. Like, look, it's just, you can do what you want to do. Someone else could do what they want to do, but that we have a choice, and people are making those decisions based on what they want to do and not being dictated to by the government because the government thinks they know best. That's what I oppose.
So, Michelle, what other actions this legislative session have you undertaken vis-a-vis election integrity?
I just passed a bill last year that said the ID requirements that are used for individuals who vote in person day of, those ID requirements have to apply to people voting in person early. And in Arizona, prior to my bill, that didn't exist. So if you voted in person day of, so like on election day, you would have to show an identification and go through a certain process. But if you voted in person early, and in Arizona we have 27 days of early voting, you would not have to show that ID. And I thought that treating in-person voters differently was inappropriate, and the ID laws should apply to everyone voting in person. So we made that uniform, and that was signed by the governor last year, and that's a really strong ID law. So we did that, and that's in effect.
And that's in effect?
It's in effect. Not a lot of people realize that if you voted early, you didn't have to show ID. You could show ID. It wasn't like prohibited, but you didn't have to. And there was it was kind of interesting because there was even some Democrat email blasts and advertisement material that said, vote early, you don't have to show an ID. And I remember thinking, that's a problem. I got to research that. Like, what's going on there? So I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't. Technically, you don't. If you vote early, you're not subject to the same ID requirements that you are if you vote early day of. And I thought that was crazy. So we fixed that. Let's see. So this was a bit of an issue, and it's been a bit of an issue for Arizona for many years, is our slow election results. So every time we have an election, it's like 8 days, 14 days, 6 days later, we're rolling out the results. And that's problematic because if you're not giving timely results, people start to get concerned, suspicious, they start to question.
So we keep counting till we win?
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, it's 2016 or 2018. Well, why is it taking 2 weeks to get results? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Look at what Ticketmaster does and what all these other companies do. We are technologically advanced in all these other arenas. Why is it taking 14 plus days to get election results? And it's a problem because, again, it erodes confidence in our election system. So I addressed that last session by saying early ballots can be counted earlier. prior to my bill, you county officials could only start counting, verifying signatures, and then counting ballots 7 days before an election. So I just bumped that up to 14 days, so that now they've got a 14-day kind of head start, and they can start verifying signatures and counting the ballots of those that have turned them in 14 days prior to election, as opposed to 7, in an effort to expedite the election results. That came out with bipartisan support from, that means Republicans and Democrats. Honestly, I think it was unanimous in the Senate, and I think unanimous in the House. So those are, I bring that up to just demonstrate not all the bills, that we do are partisan. That was one that had sweeping support, and it helped go a long way to make sure that we get results in a timely fashion, so people know, who won and who lost.
So yeah, Michelle, we always wonder why the larger states, back east, they seem to just count, and by 7 o'clock they're all done, and they turn in their results, and voila, the votes are counted, and we're done, and they announce them all, and we can't seem to do it in several days.
Well, yeah, and we're sitting here waiting, and we've made the national news because of it. Also, remember that if you do not mail your mail-in ballot back, right? So you've not dropped it in the mailbox, but you've taken your mail-in ballot and you've turned it in on election day, you've dropped it off at a polling location. In state statute, they are not allowed to count that until after the close of that election day. So when you go and drop your ballot off day of, no one can touch it until after 7 p.m. on election day. And there's tens of thousands that get dropped off. So you can imagine you take that portion of ballots, along with the fact that they weren't able to count the ballots that were mailed in. They weren't able to count ballots that were mailed in until 7 days prior to election. They just became overwhelmed. So hopefully this gives them a nice reprieve. You can count up to 14 days prior, and it should make a difference. And like I said, it got bipartisan support. So,
So if you have your ballot mailed to you, why can't you mail your ballot back?
That's the big question. I don't know. You would think that you were electing to use the service because there was a convenience that you've identified, right? And so it's odd that then you would find it inconvenient to return it via the mail. Yes. Correct. So, correct. So, yeah. So, it should be like, this system was sold on the mail. You're going to receive it by mail, and you're going to return it by mail. It's not received by mail and then returned by hand. It's received by mail and returned by mail. So if that's not something you want to do, fair enough. You can vote early. You can vote in person early. You can vote in person day of. There are other options as well. But I do think if you are going to vote by mail, then you need to finish that loop, right? It needs to be mailed to you, and then you need to return it by mail. It's like, it's a system.
And Michelle, you tried to pass a bill where two senators voted against it, where you wanted to make it mandatory that people had to mail in their ballots.
Yeah, they did. I had a bill that said, look, you can't drop it off on election day, because that's not what the polling locations are for. The polling locations are not designed to accommodate your mail-in ballot. We've altered them to accommodate your mail-in ballot, but that's not what they're designed to do. Polling locations in precincts are designed to facilitate in-person precinct voters. So, we've extended courtesies and we've put up in a drop off box, but that's not the intention. So stop using that as the way you return your ballot. You need to return it by mail. And if you don't like the mail, like, got it, no big deal. Then we won't send you a ballot by mail, and you can vote in person. It's not, you know, but those are your options. Those are your options.
And Michelle, you're now this year running for the Senate in
Yeah.
the state Senate in LD 23. Is that right?
Yes. 23, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, and Rio Verde.
And how
Yeah,
is
it's
your
going
campaign
well.
going?
So you know, every campaign is unique. This one, sir, yes, this one rises above the other unique ones to be like super unique. But I've run for many years. I've been in the House and then went to the Senate, and this will be my 6th campaign. You know, I have a great base. It's going well. I have a challenger, but that's nothing new. I always have a challenger for some reason, and that's okay. Yeah, primary. That's the way it works. I mean, look, when you take positions, when you speak up, when you speak out, when you hold the line, when you vote no, you know, you're gonna get people who disagree or who want offer an alternative, and that's what makes this country so great, that we do have that process. And I enjoy making my case because I'm very proud of my voting record and I stand by it. And you know, I'm not someone who just says a lot. I do talk a lot, but I happen to back it up with votes. And I think that's very powerful, and it has earned me the respect of my district, and they have rewarded me with electing me over and over again. And I hope to do the same thing and have the same outcome for this election.
So thank you, Michelle. We appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and helping people understand what the legislature is doing, what you specifically are doing for election integrity in Arizona. I know the voters appreciate it, and certainly Republican voters appreciate it. I know that for sure. And we wish you well in your campaign. Hope you're successful, and we look forward to seeing you down the road somewhere in 2020. And you take care of yourself.
You got it. You as well. It's been my pleasure. Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. That was Michelle Ugenti Rita, a state senator from LD23. And next week on the show, on Wednesday, we have Dr. Bob Branch. And Thursday, we have medical doctor, Dr. Lee Valite, who will be talking about COVID-19. And she has some very interesting comments to make. So anyway, we will see you all next week, and take care of yourselves. God bless you, and be safe.
you.